Israel and Iran have been at war for decades, but they've been fighting in the shadows. Assassinations, cyber attacks and devastating conflicts waged between Israel and Iranian proxies across the Middle East. Both sides see the other as an existential threat.
Where should a red line be drawn? Right here.
رژیم صهیونیستی زائده‌ای مهلک.
Israel's assassination of senior Iranian generals, Iran's unprecedented response, a direct attack with hundreds of drones and missiles, and Israel's counterstrike all had the potential to plunge the region into a massive conflict, a new era of chaos and bloodshed in the Middle East. So how do we get here, and what could it mean for the region and the rest of the world? To understand what's happening now, we have to go back 45 years to the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Relations between Iran and Israel weren't always so fractious. For years, the Shah of Iran maintained military, political and economic relations with Israel. That's until 1979, when the Shah was deposed after massive popular protests against his rule. Despite his closeness to Britain and America, millions inside Iran considered him a corrupt and oppressive leader. His overthrow led to the establishment of a theocratic regime led by Ayatollah Khomeini, who pursued an openly anti-American and anti-Israeli policy. Under Khomeini, Iran vowed to stand up to what it saw as Western powers meddling in its neighbourhood. The days of cordial relations between Israel and Iran were gone. Now America was referred to as the Great Satan and its ally Israel, the Little Satan. Animosity between Iran's new regime and Israel would soon spill over into violence that was already spreading through the region. By the early 80s, Lebanon's brutal civil war was sucking in regional powers. Israel invaded Lebanon, laying siege to West Beirut and occupying the south of the country. Israel's goal was to eliminate the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, which had been launching military operations from inside Lebanon. Iran's Revolutionary Guards responded to that invasion by forming its first and most powerful regional proxy, the militant Shia group Hezbollah. Even after PLO fighters withdrew from Lebanon in 1982, Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon remained. The conflict with Hezbollah leaves a bloody legacy. Throughout this period, the war between Israel and Iran spirals into a series of vicious and devastating attacks. In 1982, Lebanese Christian militias coordinate with the Israeli military and enter the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps in Beirut. They kill hundreds, possibly even thousands of Palestinian and Lebanese civilians. An Israeli inquiry later found that Defense Minister Ariel Sharon bore personal responsibility for not preventing the bloodshed. The following year, Hezbollah killed dozens of Israeli soldiers with a suicide car bomb in Tyre. And the group carries out the deadliest attack on American Marines since World War II, a plan masterminded by Iran. The violence spreads far beyond Lebanon's borders. Argentina suffers two devastating terror attacks in just a few years. The first on Israel's embassy in Buenos Aires, and another on a Jewish cultural center, killing dozens of civilians. Argentina and Israel both blame Iran and Hezbollah for the attacks. Since its very beginnings, Israel has been able to rely on significant Western and American support, financially, diplomatically, militarily. Iran, on the other hand, has been able to broaden its reach and spread its ideology and influence through a network of powerful armed groups and political alliances across the region. Hezbollah's formation in the early 80s is a direct extension of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps. Over time, Iran establishes key alliances with groups like Hamas in Gaza, powerful Shia militias in Iraq, the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and as the war in Yemen rages on, the Houthis increasingly rely on Iranian weapons and support. This network is built over the course of 4 decades, often referred to as the axis of resistance.
איראן עומדת מאחורי חמאס, מאחורי חיזבאללה, מאחורי אחרים, אבל אנחנו נחושים לנצח שם ולהגן על עצמנו בכל הזירות.
In the eyes of Israel, Western powers and their Arab allies, Iran is a malign influence stoking instability across the region. Iran and its supporters have a different point of view, saying that Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories, Britain and America's invasion of Iraq, and the West's support of the conflict in Yemen have created chaos, and Iranians are capitalizing on all of that. At the centre of this shadow war has been the issue of Iran's nuclear program. Iran insists it's enriching uranium for civilian purposes. Israel and Western intelligence agencies believe its ultimate ambition is to build the bomb. What ensues over 2 decades are cyber attacks, suspicious assassinations, and the rising possibility of war between Iran and Israel. In 2010, a malicious computer virus known as Stuxnet infiltrated a uranium enrichment facility in Iran's Natanz nuclear site. The software is believed to have been developed by American and Israeli experts. 2 years later, a senior Iranian scientist was killed by a bomb placed in his car in Tehran. Many more scientists and officials linked to Iran's nuclear program were also killed in suspicious circumstances. American officials grow increasingly concerned that Israel is ready to attack Iran's nuclear sites directly, and so they embark on secret negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program, culminating in the signing of the JCPOA in 2015 by Iran, America, Britain and other global powers, ensuring Iran's nuclear program remains peaceful in return for sanctions being lifted. The election of Donald Trump, though, destroys that deal. America withdraws from the agreement.
That was one of the most ridiculous deals ever made by any country at any time.
In 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reveals allegedly stolen files retrieved from a warehouse inside Tehran. He claims proves Iran is trying to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran dismisses the accusations. In the summer of 2020, a fire breaks out at a key Iranian nuclear facility, causing significant damage. The same plant is attacked a year later in what Iranian officials describe as nuclear terrorism. Both incidents are believed to be acts of sabotage carried out by Israel. And in November 2020, Iran's chief nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, is assassinated in an audacious attack using remote-control weapons in another operation thought to be conducted by Mossad. Hamas's attack in Israel on the 7th of October has created arguably the biggest crisis the Middle East has faced in generations. 1,200 Israelis killed, civilians and soldiers, 240 hostages taken into Gaza. Israel's ensuing war in Gaza has killed tens of thousands of civilians. Led to a humanitarian disaster.
للأسف يعني ما في أي مكان.
And drawn retaliation from Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and now from Iran itself. On April the 1st, Israel carried out an airstrike on an Iranian consular building in the Syrian capital Damascus. 2 senior Iranian commanders were killed, including the IRGC's Mohammad Reza Sahedi, a key military figure that Israel says is setting up Hezbollah in Syria. It's not the first time Israel has targeted Iranian facilities in Syria, but the attack on a diplomatic building raises the stakes, and Iran vows to respond.
The wicked regime made a mistake in this case. It must be punished, and it will be punished.
2 weeks later, Iran sends hundreds of missiles and drones towards Israel, the first direct military action launched from its own soil against its longtime enemy. The majority are intercepted before causing major damage, but the severity of this escalation leads many to fear an all-out war. Israel's counterstrike appears to have fallen short of more serious escalation, but the risk will always be there, especially as long as the war in Gaza goes on. Looking back over the bloody history of these two countries, the prospect of direct confrontation has been coming. Both Iran and Israel have practiced an unwritten policy of mutual deterrence, knowing that all-out war would simply be too costly. But the events of October the 7th and the war in Gaza seem to have not just changed the rules of the game, but to have completely dismantled them, making both sides look like they are hurtling towards further escalation. If that happens, the events of October the 7th and the war in Gaza could be just the beginning of something far worse.